A humble little girl fixes a $4 million Shelby GT350R after more than 40 mechanics failed. But when the millionaire sees a ring on her finger, he goes pale. Before anything else, if this video finds you well, wherever you are, let me know how it made you feel at the end. The morning sun cast long shadows across Wellington Motors' pristine garage when 8-year-old Lily pressed her small face against the glass door. Inside, 43 of the country's finest mechanics stood around a gleaming red Shelby GT350R worth $4 million, their heads shaking in defeat. "Another one bites the dust," muttered Tommy Rodriguez, the head mechanic, tossing his wrench onto the concrete floor. "Boss ain't gonna like this." Marcus Wellington, 28 and heir to the Wellington automotive empire, paced behind them like a caged lion. His grandfather's prized 1967 Shelby had been acting up for months, and every expert he'd hired had failed to diagnose the mysterious engine problem that left the beast purring one day and roaring in protest the next. "Sir, maybe we should contact Detroit again," suggested one mechanic, wiping grease from his hands. 43 mechanics, Tommy. 43! Marcus's voice echoed through the cavernous garage. "Including 2 guys who built engines for NASCAR. How is this even possible?" Outside, Lily shifted her weight from one worn sneaker to the other. Her second-hand clothes hung loose on her tiny frame, and her wild brown curls escaped from a faded red bandana. She'd been watching through that window every morning for 3 weeks. Ever since she'd heard Mrs. Chen from the children's home talking about the impossible car that stumped everyone. The problem wasn't impossible to her, though. She could hear it in the engine's rhythm, a whisper that spoke of timing chains and compression ratios, of fuel mixture dancing just slightly offbeat. Her fingers itched to touch those chrome components, to feel the heartbeat of machinery that others couldn't understand. "Mr. Wellington." Lily's voice was barely audible as she knocked on the glass. Marcus turned, surprised to see a child at his exclusive garage. "We're closed, sweetheart. This isn't a playground." "I can fix your car." The mechanics burst into laughter. Tommy shook his head sympathetically. "Kid, this machine costs more than most people make in a lifetime. Run along home now." But Lily didn't move. Her dark eyes met Marcus's through the glass, and something in that steady gaze made him pause. There was knowledge there, ancient and patient, that didn't belong in an 8-year-old's face. "What's your name?" Marcus asked, opening the door. "Lily." She stepped inside, her presence immediately dwarfed by the massive garage. "And I really can fix it." Marcus studied her for a long moment. Every rational thought screamed that this was ridiculous, but desperation had taught him to consider impossible options. "Show me." Lily approached the Shelby with reverence, her small hands clasped behind her back as if resisting the urge to reach out. The mechanics watched with a mixture of amusement and curiosity as she walked a slow circle around the vehicle. Her head tilted like she was listening to something only she could hear. "The timing's off," she said quietly, more to herself than to the assembled crowd. "Not much, but enough. And the fuel mixture's running too rich on cylinders 3 and 6. Tommy's eyebrows shot up. "How could you possibly know that without even—" "Because she sounds sad," Lily interrupted, placing her palm flat against the hood, "like she's trying to sing but can't find the right notes." Marcus felt goosebumps rise on his arms. His grandfather used to talk about cars the same way, as if they were living creatures with feelings and moods. "What else do you hear?" "She misses someone," Lily said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Someone who understood her song." The garage fell silent except for the distant hum of fluorescent lights. Marcus's throat tightened. His grandfather Harold had built this car with his own hands, spent countless hours fine-tuning every component until it ran like liquid music. He'd disappeared 15 years ago, when Marcus was just 13, leaving behind only questions and this beautiful, temperamental machine. "Can you really fix her?" Marcus asked. Lily nodded solemnly. "But I'll need to get under the hood. And I work better when it's quiet." Marcus looked around at his team of professionals, all of whom had failed where this small child claimed she could succeed. Logic warred with intuition. but something deep in his chest, the part that still remembered his grandfather's gentle hands and patient voice, told him to trust her. "Everyone out?" he said. "Marcus, you can't be serious," Tommy protested. "Out, all of you!" Reluctantly, the mechanics filed toward the exit, muttering among themselves. Tommy lingered at the door. "If she breaks anything—" "She won't," Marcus said with more confidence than he felt. Alone with Lily, he watched as she approached the Shelby's engine compartment. Her movements were precise, almost ritualistic, as she examined each component. When she finally spoke, her words sent chills down his spine. "He taught me about cars like this one. Said they were special. Said they had souls." "Who taught you?" But Lily was already lost in her work, her small fingers dancing across the engine with shocking expertise. Marcus watched in stunned silence as Lily's hands moved through the engine compartment with supernatural precision. She adjusted the carburetor settings with delicate touches, her fingers somehow knowing exactly where to find components that full-grown mechanics had struggled to locate. "There," she whispered, making a final micro-adjustment to the timing chain. "Try her now." Marcus slid into the driver's seat, his hands trembling slightly as he turned the key. The Shelby roared to life, with a sound that made his heart skip. Not the frustrated growl it had been producing for months, but the deep, satisfied purr he remembered from his childhood. "Impossible," he breathed, revving the engine. The response was immediate and perfect, each cylinder firing in flawless harmony. "How did you—" He turned to find Lily backing away from the car, her eyes wide with something that looked like fear. But it wasn't the vehicle that had frightened her. It was the way Marcus was staring at her hands, more specifically, at the ring on her right index finger. The ring was silver, tarnished with age, with an intricate design of interlocking gears that Marcus recognized with shocking clarity. His grandfather had worn that exact ring every day until the morning he vanished. Marcus had searched everywhere for it, believing it had been lost forever, along with Harold himself. "Where did you get that?" His voice came out sharper than he intended. Lily's hand flew to cover the ring, her defensive posture reminding Marcus painfully of a frightened animal. "It was a gift." "From who?" I have to go." Lily bolted for the exit, but Marcus caught up with her in 3 quick strides. "Wait, please!" He knelt down to her eye level, softening his voice. "I'm sorry I scared you. That ring, it belonged to someone very important to me, someone I lost a long time ago." Lily's dark eyes searched his face, as if weighing whether she could trust him. "He gave it to me," she said finally. "Said it would keep me safe and help me remember what he taught me." Marcus's world tilted. "He? Who is he?" "An old man. He found me when I was really little and scared. He took care of me for 2 years before." Her voice trailed off. "Before what?" "Before he got sick and couldn't anymore. That's when I went to live with Mrs. Chen at the children's home." Lily twisted the ring nervously. "He said someday someone might come looking for this ring, and if they did, I should tell them about the man who could make any engine sing." Marcus felt like he couldn't breathe. "What was his name?" "Harry," Lily whispered. "But when he was dreaming, sometimes he called himself Harold." The children's home stood at the end of Maple Street like a fortress of faded brick and good intentions. Marcus followed Lily through the front door, his mind reeling with questions that demanded answers. Mrs. Chen, a kind-faced woman in her 60s, looked up from her paperwork with surprise. "Lily, you're back early from your walk, and you've brought a guest." "Mrs. Chen, this is Marcus. He knew Harry." The older woman's expression shifted, becoming guarded. "I see, Mr. Wellington, Marcus Wellington." He extended his hand, noting how Mrs. Chen's eyes widened slightly at the name. "I need to ask you about the man who brought Lily here 2 years ago. Perhaps we should speak privately," Mrs. Chen suggested, glancing meaningfully at Lily. "No," Lily said firmly, crossing her arms. "If it's about Harry, I want to hear it." Mrs. Chen sighed, gesturing for them to sit in her small office. "The man who brought Lily here was unusual. He'd been caring for her since she was 6, after her parents died in that terrible accident on Highway 9. He never gave us his full name, just asked us to call him Harry. Marcus leaned forward. What did he look like? Tall, silver-haired, probably in his 70s, had the most remarkable hands, covered in old scars, but incredibly gentle. And his eyes. Mrs. Chen paused, studying Marcus's face. His eyes were the same shade of blue as yours. The room seemed to spin around Marcus. Did he say anything about his family? About why he couldn't keep caring for Lily? He was sick, Mrs. Chen said quietly. Some kind of heart condition, he said. He wanted to make sure Lily would be safe before. She didn't finish the sentence. Before what? Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. Before he died, I assume. He never came back to visit, and we couldn't contact him because he never left an address. Just a large donation to cover Lily's care, and that ring she wears. Lily had been silent through this exchange, but now she spoke up. He's not dead. Both adults turned to her in surprise. He can't be, she continued with 8-year-old logic. Dead people can't teach you things in dreams, and Harry still teaches me things. Just last week, he showed me how to fix a transmission that wouldn't shift into 3rd gear. Marcus felt his throat constrict. His grandfather had been an automotive genius, capable of diagnosing problems that stumped engineers with decades of experience. If Harold was somehow still alive, still out there. Lily, he said carefully, in these dreams, where does Harry live? In a cabin by a lake. There's an old blue truck parked outside, and the workshop smells like motor oil and pine trees. Her voice took on a dreamy quality. He says someday we'll work on cars together again. But first, I have to grow up strong and smart. Marcus's hands were shaking now. He knew that cabin. He'd spent countless summers there as a child, learning at his grandfather's side in that very workshop Lily described. The drive to Pine Lake took 47 minutes through winding mountain roads that Marcus hadn't traveled in 15 years. Lily sat beside him in his Mercedes, her small frame nearly swallowed by the leather passenger seat, watching the familiar landscape unfold with eyes that seemed to recognize every twist and turn. That's where Harry taught me to identify different engine sounds, she said, pointing to a scenic overlook. He'd make me close my eyes and tell him if the cars passing by needed tune-ups. Marcus's grip tightened on the steering wheel. That overlook had been one of his grandfather's favorite spots for the exact same lesson. What else did he teach you? Everything, Lily said simply. How to listen to what machines are really trying to say. How to fix things with patience instead of force. How to remember that every car has a story, and our job is to help it keep telling that story. Those words could have come directly from Harold Wellington's mouth. Marcus had heard that exact philosophy countless times during their weekend adventures to this very cabin. As they rounded the final curve, Pine Lake spread out before them like a mirror reflecting the afternoon sky. And there, exactly where Marcus remembered it, sat the weathered log cabin with its familiar wraparound porch and stone chimney. There's no blue truck, Marcus observed, pulling into the gravel driveway. There should be, Lily said, frowning. In my dreams, there's always a blue truck. The cabin looked abandoned, its windows dark and porch sagging with neglect. Marcus felt his hopes crumbling as they approached the front door. Of course, Harold wasn't here. It had been foolish to think otherwise. But then Lily ran ahead to a small window and pressed her face against the glass. "The workshop," she exclaimed. "It's exactly like I dreamed." Marcus joined her at the window, peering into what had once been his grandfather's sacred space. Workbenches lined the walls, covered with tools arranged in precise order. Parts and components sat waiting for projects that would never be completed. And there, on the far wall, hung a faded photograph that made Marcus's breath catch. It was a picture of himself at age 10, standing proudly beside his first successful engine rebuild, while Harold's hand rested on his shoulder. "He talks about you sometimes," Lily said quietly. "In the dreams. Says he wishes he could have said goodbye properly. Says he hopes you remember the important lessons." Marcus fumbled with the spare key that had always been hidden under the loose porch board. His fingers found it exactly where memory suggested, and the cabin door swung open with a familiar creak. Inside, Everything was frozen in time. Harold's coffee mug sat on the kitchen table, a ring of dried residue marking where his last cup had been. Medical bottles lined the windowsill, their labels confirming Mrs. Chen's story about his heart condition. But it was the note on the kitchen counter that brought Marcus to his knees. "My dearest Marcus," the note began in Harold's careful handwriting. "If you're reading this, then little Lily has led you home." Marcus's vision blurred as he continued reading. Lily pressed close to his side, as if she could somehow absorb the words through proximity. "I know you have questions, and I wish I could answer them in person, but my heart is failing, and time is a luxury I no longer possess. By now you've met the extraordinary child I've been caring for, and you've seen that she carries a gift that defies explanation. Lily isn't just gifted with machines, son. She's connected to them in ways that even I don't fully understand. When I found her after that terrible accident that claimed her parents, she was broken, not just emotionally but spiritually. She'd lost everything, and the world seemed determined to overlook her existence. But in my workshop, surrounded by engines and transmissions and the honest work of making broken things whole again, she began to heal. More than that, she began to understand. The mechanical knowledge I spent 70 years accumulating, she absorbed in months. It's as if the machines themselves chose to trust her with their secrets." Marcus looked down at Lily, who was listening with rapt attention despite her young age. "Keep reading," she whispered. "I've taught her everything I know, not just about repairs, but about respect. Respect for the craftsmanship of those who came before us, respect for the stories these machines carry, and respect for the responsibility that comes with such rare understanding. The ring she wears was my father's and his father's before that. It represents 4 generations of Wellington automotive legacy. I give it to her not because she carries our blood, but because she carries our passion. She is more worthy of that inheritance than anyone I've ever known. Marcus, I need you to promise me something. Watch over her, not as an obligation, but as family. She has no one else. And the world will try to convince her that her gifts aren't real or valuable. Don't let them diminish her light. In the workshop, behind the blue toolbox, you'll find documents I've prepared. Adoption papers, a trust fund in her name, and detailed instructions for her continued education. I've spent my final months ensuring her future is secure, but she needs more than money. She needs someone who understands what it means to hear the music in machinery. Take care of each other, and remember, sometimes the most important legacies aren't passed down through bloodlines, but through shared purpose and love. Your grandfather, Harold Wellington. P.S. The blue truck Lily remembers from her dreams is in the barn. I've been restoring it for her to drive when she's older. The keys are in my desk drawer. Marcus set the letter down with trembling hands. Through the window he could see Lily running toward the barn, her excited shouts carrying across the still air of the lake. When she emerged minutes later, she was beaming and covered in dust, dangling a set of keys like a trophy. "It's beautiful, Marcus, and it runs perfect. I can tell just by listening to it breathe." Standing there in his grandfather's kitchen, watching this extraordinary child who had somehow inherited everything that mattered most about the Wellington legacy, Marcus finally understood why Harold had disappeared without saying goodbye. He hadn't left them at all. He'd simply found a different way to come home. 3 weeks later, Marcus stood in the gleaming lobby of Patterson and Associates, the city's most prestigious family law firm, with Lily beside him clutching a folder of documents. Her small hand fit perfectly in his as they waited to meet with the adoption specialist who would help them navigate the legal maze ahead. "Are you nervous?" he asked, noticing how she kept adjusting the silver ring on her finger. "A little," Lily admitted. "What if they say I can't live with you? What if they think I'm too weird because I talk to cars?" Marcus knelt down to her eye level, the same way he had that first day in his garage. "Listen to me, Lily Wellington." Her eyes widened at hearing the surname attached to her name. You're not weird, you're extraordinary, and anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve to make decisions about your future. Lily Wellington, she repeated softly, testing how it sounded. I like it. Miss Patterson will see you now, announced the receptionist. Sarah Patterson was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who specialized in unusual adoption cases. She'd reviewed Harold's meticulously prepared documents, which included not only the adoption papers, but detailed psychological evaluations of both Lily and Marcus, financial statements, and even character references from mechanics who'd witnessed Lily's impossible abilities. This is quite remarkable, Ms. Patterson said, spreading the papers across her mahogany desk. Your grandfather was incredibly thorough. He's essentially created an ironclad case for this adoption, complete with testimony from child psychologists confirming Lily's emotional stability and intellectual gifts. Marcus felt a surge of gratitude for his grandfather's foresight. Even in his final months, Harold had been thinking 3 steps ahead, anticipating obstacles and clearing them away. However, Miss Patterson continued, there are some unusual elements we need to address. Lily's abilities have been documented by multiple witnesses, which is unprecedented. The court will want to understand how a child her age acquired such sophisticated technical knowledge. Harry taught me, Lily said simply. He said learning is just about paying attention to what things are trying to tell you. Miss Patterson smiled. I'm sure he did. But we'll need to present this in terms the court can understand without raising questions about your educational background. Over the next hour, they crafted a narrative that was both truthful and palatable to family court judges. Lily had been homeschooled by a brilliant automotive engineer who recognized her natural aptitude. Her knowledge was remarkable, but not supernatural. Marcus was a successful businessman, seeking to honor his grandfather's final wishes while providing a stable home for a gifted child. The preliminary hearing is set for next Friday, Miss Patterson concluded. Given the documentation your grandfather provided and your own financial stability, I don't anticipate any serious challenges. But Lily, you might need to demonstrate your abilities for the judge. Can I bring the blue truck? Lily asked eagerly. Marcus laughed, remembering how she'd spent every afternoon for the past 3 weeks tinkering with Harold's restoration project. I think we'll start with something smaller. As they left the law office, Lily skipped beside him on the sidewalk. Marcus, when I'm officially your daughter, can we work on cars together every day? Every day, he promised, realizing that somewhere along the way he'd stopped thinking of this as obligation and started thinking of it as the greatest gift his grandfather could have given him. That evening, back at the cabin, Marcus watched Lily crawl under the hood of an old Mustang he'd brought for her to practice on. Her concentration was absolute, her movements precise and confident, but it was the way she hummed while she worked, the same absent melody Harold used to hum in his workshop, that made Marcus's chest tight with emotion. Found the problem, Lily announced, emerging with grease-stained hands and a triumphant smile. The timing belt's stretched, and there's a vacuum leak in the intake manifold. Marcus checked her diagnosis and found it flawless. How do you do it, Lily? Really? She considered the question seriously. It's like, imagine if you could hear colors or see music. The engines talk to me, and I just listen. Harry said some people are born with the gift, but most people are too busy thinking to hear what the world is really saying. Later that night, as Marcus tucked Lily into the cabin's small guest room, she grabbed his hand. Marcus, do you think Harry's proud of us? Marcus looked down at this extraordinary child who'd somehow become the center of his world in just 3 weeks. I think he's the proudest grandfather who ever lived. But as he turned off the lights, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that Harold's presence in this cabin was more than just memory and old photographs. The following morning brought an unexpected visitor to Pine Lake. Marcus was teaching Lily how to rebuild a carburetor when they heard tires crunching on the gravel driveway. Through the workshop window, he saw a battered pickup truck that looked like it had seen better decades. The driver was a man in his 60s with weathered hands and kind eyes, wearing coveralls that had Eddie's Garage embroidered on the pocket. He approached the cabin with the uncertain gait of someone who wasn't sure he'd be welcome. "Can I help you?" Marcus called out, wiping his hands on a shop rag. "Name's Eddie Kowalski. I knew your grandfather." The man's voice carried a weight of unfinished business. "Heard through the grapevine that someone was back at the old place." Lily emerged from behind the Mustang, her face lighting up with recognition. "Eddie, Harry told me about you. You're the one who taught him about foreign engines." Eddie's eyes widened. "How could you possibly know that? Harold and I haven't spoken in—" He paused, calculating. "Must be going on 8 years now." "Lily has an unusual connection to people who understand cars," Marcus said carefully. "Please come inside. I'd like to hear about my grandfather." Over coffee, in the cabin's small kitchen, Eddie's story unfolded like a confession. "Harold and I were business partners for almost 20 years. Had a restoration shop in Denver that specialized in classics. We were doing real well until—" He stopped, his weathered face creasing with old pain. "Until what?" Marcus prompted. "Until I made a mistake that cost us everything. There was this rare Ferrari, a 1962 250 GTO worth more than most people's houses. Client brought it in for a complete restoration, and I got careless. One night, working late, I knocked over a solvent bottle. The whole shop went up in flames." Lily had been listening intently, her dark eyes reflecting understanding beyond her years. "Harry never blamed you," she said quietly. "In the dreams, he always says accidents happen to everyone, but only some people learn from them." Eddie's hands trembled as he set down his coffee cup. "Dreams? What dreams?" Marcus and Lily exchanged glances. They'd grown comfortable with Lily's unusual connection to Harold, but explaining it to others remained challenging. "Lily sometimes dreams about my grandfather," Marcus said. "She's been having them since she was very young. The insurance company investigated for months," Eddie continued, his voice heavy with guilt. "They couldn't prove it was anything but an accident, but the damage was done. Harold lost everything. His shop, his reputation, his savings. I tried to make it right, but he'd already disappeared." "He didn't disappear because of you," Lily said with startling authority. "He left because he needed to find something more important than money or shops or reputation." "What could be more important than that?" Eddie asked. "Me," Lily said simply. "He needed to find me so he could teach me what really mattered." Eddie stared at her for a long moment, then turned to Marcus. "Your grandfather was the finest mechanic I ever knew, but more than that, he was the most honest man I ever met. If he saw something special in this little girl—" "He did," Marcus confirmed. "And now I'm starting to understand why." Eddie reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn envelope. "I've been carrying this around for 8 years, hoping someday I'd get the chance to give it to Harold. It's the deed to a piece of property outside Denver. Small place, but it has a good workshop. I bought it with insurance money from the fire. Figured it was the least I could do." Marcus opened the envelope and studied the legal documents. The property was modest, but well situated, with a house and a large garage that would be perfect for a restoration business. "I can't accept this," Marcus said. "It's not for you," Eddie replied, looking at Lily. "It's for her. Harold always said the next generation needed a place to carry on the tradition. Seems to me she's that next generation." Lily walked over to Eddie and took his gnarled hand in her small one. "Harry says to tell you that forgiveness isn't something you ask for. It's something you give yourself when you're ready to stop carrying old mistakes." Eddie's eyes filled with tears. How could she possibly know I needed to hear that? Marcus was beginning to wonder the same thing. Lily's connection to Harold was becoming impossible to dismiss as childhood imagination. The specific knowledge, the precise phrases that sounded exactly like his grandfather's voice. It was as if Harold was somehow still present, still teaching, still guiding them through Lily's extraordinary gift. That night, after Eddie had left with promises to visit again soon, Marcus found Lily sitting on the cabin's porch, staring out at the lake. "Lily, I need to ask you something, and I want you to tell me the truth. In these dreams, do you actually talk to my grandfather?" She nodded solemnly. "Every night. He's teaching me advanced transmission work now. Says I'll need to know it for what's coming next." "What's coming next?" Lily turned to look at him with eyes that held ancient wisdom. "He's getting ready to come home, Marcus. For real this time." The adoption hearing had gone perfectly. Judge Morrison, a grey-haired woman with a reputation for thoroughness, had been visibly impressed by Lily's demonstration of automotive knowledge and Marcus's obvious devotion to her welfare. Harold's meticulously prepared documents had addressed every possible concern, and within an hour, Lily Wellington officially became Marcus's daughter. Now, 2 weeks later, they were settling into a routine at the cabin that felt like they'd been family for years. Marcus had taken extended leave from Wellington Motors to focus on Lily's unconventional education, and every day brought new revelations about her extraordinary abilities. "Marcus, come quick!" Lily's excited voice carried from the workshop, where she'd been working on a stubborn transmission. He found her standing beside the workbench, holding up a small metal object that glinted in the afternoon light. "I found this inside the transmission housing. It was wrapped in oiled cloth, like someone hid it there on purpose." Marcus took the object, recognizing it immediately as a USB drive. But this wasn't any ordinary storage device. It was encased in a custom-machined aluminum housing with the Wellington family crest engraved on one side. "This is my grandfather's work," Marcus said, running his finger over the precise engraving. "He always made protective cases for important things." "What do you think is on it?" Lily asked, practically bouncing with curiosity. Marcus's laptop was in the cabin's small office, and they hurried inside to solve the mystery. The USB drive contained dozens of video files, all dated within the past 3 years. Marcus clicked on the first one, and his grandfather's familiar face filled the screen. "Hello, Marcus. Hello, Lily." Harold's voice was exactly as Marcus remembered, warm, patient, tinged with the slight accent that marked his Pennsylvania Dutch heritage. "If you're watching this, then you found the first of my messages." Lily gasped and clapped her hands together. "It's really him, just like in the dreams." On screen, Harold smiled as if he could hear her reaction. "Lily, my dear girl, I hope you've been practicing the transmission work I've been teaching you. You'll need those skills soon." Marcus felt the world tilt around him. "He's talking like he recorded this recently, but that's impossible." "I know you have questions," Harold continued, "and I promise they'll be answered. But first, you need to understand what Lily's gift really means. She's not just mechanically inclined, son. She's connected to the consciousness that exists within complex machines. Every engine, every transmission, every precisely engineered system develops a form of awareness over time. Most people can't perceive it, but Lily can communicate with that awareness." "The dreams aren't dreams," Lily whispered. "They're real conversations. The ring she wears isn't just a family heirloom," Harold's image explained. "It's been modified with a rare earth element that enhances the connection between her consciousness and mechanical systems. It was my father's greatest discovery, and now it's her greatest tool." Marcus stared at the ring on Lily's finger with new understanding. "That's why you can diagnose problems others can't solve. Your next task," Harold continued, "is to visit coordinates 39.7392 GUDGN 104.99903 DW. There you'll find proof that death isn't always the end of our ability to teach and protect those we love." The video ended, leaving Marcus and Lily staring at a blank screen. Marcus quickly input the coordinates into his phone's GPS, and his breath caught when he saw the location. "That's the address of Eddie's new property," he said. "The workshop he wanted to give us." "Harry wants us to go there," Lily said with certainty. "He's been preparing something special." The drive to Denver took 3 hours, during which Lily chatted excitedly about what they might find. Marcus's mind raced with possibilities, none of which seemed adequate to explain what they'd witnessed. How could Harold have recorded those videos if he was dead? And if he wasn't dead, where had he been for the past 2 years? Eddie met them at the property with keys and a sheepish expression. "I know I should have mentioned this earlier, but there's been some strange activity here lately. Motion sensors going off, lights turning on by themselves. The security company thinks it's electrical problems, but you think it's something else," Marcus finished. Eddie nodded. "Your grandfather was always unusual, even back in our partnership days. He had insights that defied explanation. If anyone could find a way to stick around after death, it would be Harold Wellington." The workshop was larger than it had appeared from outside, with high ceilings and state-of-the-art equipment that looked far too modern for a property Eddie could have afforded. In the center of the space sat a partially assembled engine, unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. "That's not a car engine," he said, approaching the mysterious machinery. "No," Lily said, her voice filled with wonder. "It's much more important than that." She walked directly to a specific workbench and opened a drawer that contained another USB drive. This one was warm to the touch, as if it had been recently handled. "The second message," she said, handing it to Marcus with trembling fingers. Back at Eddie's house, they gathered around his computer to watch Harold's next revelation. This time, he appeared older, more frail, but his eyes burned with urgency. "If you're watching this, then you found my greatest work," Harold began. "The engine you discovered isn't for any vehicle. It's a consciousness preservation device, a way for human awareness to survive beyond physical death and continue interacting with the world through mechanical systems." Marcus felt his reality reshaping itself around Harold's impossible words. "I've been dead for 6 months," Harold continued. "But my consciousness lives on within the quantum processing matrix I spent 5 years developing. I can still think, still learn, still teach. Most importantly, I can still love and protect my family." "Harry," Lily called out to the screen, "can you hear me right now?" The image of Harold paused, then smiled directly at her. "Hello, my darling girl. Yes, I can hear you. I've been waiting for you to find me." The workshop suddenly came alive around them. Lights flickered in sequence, tools moved on their own, and the partially assembled consciousness device hummed with purposeful energy. Marcus grabbed Lily's hand instinctively, his rational mind struggling to process what was happening. "Don't be afraid," Harold's voice echoed from speakers throughout the space, no longer confined to the laptop screen. "This is still me, just in a different form." Eddie stumbled backward, crossing himself. "Mother of God, Harold, what have you done?" "Lo, what I had to do to keep my promises," Harold replied, his voice warm with affection. "I couldn't leave Lily alone in the world, and I couldn't leave Marcus without understanding his true purpose. Death would have meant abandoning them both." A robotic arm extended from the ceiling, moving with fluid precision to hand Lily a modified wrench that seemed designed specifically for her small hands. She accepted it without fear, as if receiving tools from invisible benefactors was perfectly normal. "The consciousness preservation technology," Harold explained, "allows me to exist within any sufficiently complex mechanical system. I can inhabit engines, computers, entire manufacturing facilities. But more importantly, I can continue teaching and protecting the people I love." Marcus found his voice. "How long have you been like this?" "I died 18 months ago in a hospital in Colorado Springs. Heart failure, just as I expected. But I'd already transferred my consciousness to the quantum matrix 3 days earlier. The transition was unusual, but successful. That's why the dreams felt so real," Lily said with sudden understanding. "You weren't visiting me in sleep. You were actually there, inside the electrical systems of the children's home. Every building has a nervous system of wires and circuits," Harold confirmed. "I learned to move through them like highways, visiting you whenever you needed guidance or comfort." Marcus sank into a nearby chair, overwhelmed. "The Shelby, when she fixed it so easily." "I was guiding her hands," Harold admitted. "Lily has the natural gift, but she's still learning. I provided the experience she needed to make those precise adjustments." "So you've been manipulating everything?" Marcus asked, unsure whether to feel grateful or deceived. Not manipulating, Harold corrected gently. Protecting, guiding, teaching. Everything that happened was real. Lily's abilities, your connection to her, the love growing between you. I simply ensured that obstacles didn't prevent what was meant to be. Lily approached the consciousness device with reverence, her small hands tracing its intricate components. It's beautiful, Harry, but why are you showing us this now? Because it's time for the final lesson, Harold said. I created this technology not just for myself, but for the future. Imagine mechanics who never lose their accumulated knowledge, engineers whose expertise survives to teach the next generation, artists and teachers and inventors whose consciousness can continue creating long after their bodies fail. You're talking about immortality, Marcus breathed. I'm talking about evolution, Harold replied, the next step in human development. But it requires someone with your mechanical intuition to perfect the technology and someone with Lily's unique gifts to bridge the gap between human consciousness and mechanical systems. The workshop around them pulsed with energy, every machine and tool responding to Harold's presence. Marcus realized that his grandfather hadn't just preserved his consciousness, he'd become something entirely new, a fusion of human wisdom and technological capability. What do you need from us? Marcus asked. Help me complete the work, Harold said. The prototype sustains my consciousness, but it's not stable long-term. I need your engineering skills and Lily's intuitive understanding to perfect the quantum matrix. And then what? Lily asked. Then we'll have to decide whether this gift should be shared with the world or whether humanity isn't ready for such power. Eddie, who had been silently observing the impossible conversation, finally spoke up. Harold, my old friend, are you asking them to play God? No, Harold replied after a long pause. I'm asking them to help me figure out how to stop playing God and start being human again, just in a different way than anyone's ever tried before. Ooh, the weight of the decision settled over them like a heavy blanket. Marcus looked at Lily, seeing in her young face the same determination that had driven Harold to attempt the impossible. What happens if we say no? Marcus asked. Then my consciousness gradually degrades over the next few months, and I finally experience true death, Harold said without self-pity, and the technology dies with me. And if we say yes, then we change the world forever, together. Lily walked over to Marcus and took his hand. What do you think we should do? Marcus looked around the workshop filled with impossible technology, then at the child who could speak to machines, then at the robotic systems that housed his grandfather's living consciousness. 3 weeks ago, his biggest concern had been fixing a temperamental Shelby. Now he was being asked to help redefine the nature of human existence. I think, he said slowly, we should finish what family started. See, the next 3 months transformed the Denver workshop into something that belonged more in a science fiction novel than the real world. Marcus had taken a leave of absence from Wellington Motors, explaining to his board that he was pursuing a revolutionary automotive technology that could change the industry forever. It wasn't entirely a lie. Lily proved to be invaluable in ways that continuously surprised Marcus. Her intuitive understanding of mechanical systems allowed her to troubleshoot problems that would have taken teams of engineers weeks to solve. More remarkably, she could communicate directly with Harold's consciousness, serving as a bridge between his digital existence and the physical world. The quantum resonance frequency is still unstable, Harold reported through the workshop's speaker system during one of their late-night work sessions. We're losing coherence every 72 hours. Lily was lying on her back beneath the main consciousness matrix, her small hands working with components that cost more than most people's cars. It's not a frequency problem, she said with confidence that still amazed Marcus. It's a loneliness problem. I beg your pardon? Harold's digital voice carried a note of confusion. You're trying to exist by yourself in the quantum field, Lily explained. emerging from beneath the machinery with grease-stained coveralls. But consciousness isn't meant to be isolated. You need connection points, anchors to other minds. Marcus looked up from the diagnostic equipment he'd been monitoring. She's right. Every stability crisis happens when the system tries to process complex emotional memories. Grief, love, regret. The quantum matrix can't handle the full spectrum of human feeling alone. "What are you suggesting?" Harold asked. Lily wiped her hands on a shop rag, a gesture so reminiscent of Harold that Marcus felt his chest tighten. "I'm suggesting that maybe one consciousness isn't enough. Maybe the system needs multiple perspectives to remain stable." The workshop fell silent, except for the hum of cooling fans and the distant sounds of Denver traffic. Marcus understood the implications of what Lily was proposing, and the weight of it made him dizzy. "You're talking about uploading other people," he said. "Not uploading," Lily corrected. "Connecting. Creating a network where consciousness can exist both in biological and digital forms simultaneously. No one has to die. No one has to be alone." Harold's presence seemed to intensify around them, the lights brightening and the air itself becoming charged with energy. "It's theoretically possible," he admitted. "But the risks?" "What risks?" Marcus asked. "Loss of individual identity, corruption of consciousness data, the possibility that human awareness isn't compatible with extended digital existence." Harold paused. "And the question of whether we have the right to alter the fundamental nature of human death." The Eddie had become a regular visitor to the workshop, bringing food and offering emotional support for what he privately called the craziest project in human history. Now he spoke up from the corner where he'd been quietly observing their work. "Harold, you've been dead for 18 months and you're still the same stubborn, brilliant man I worked with for 20 years. If that's not proof that consciousness survives the transition, I don't know what is." "But am I still human?" Harold asked. "Or have I become something else entirely?" Lily walked over to the main interface console and placed her hand on its surface. Immediately, the screens around them filled with images, memories from Harold's long life, rendered in perfect digital clarity. Marcus saw his own childhood reflected back at him, moments of learning and laughter in Harold's workshop that he'd forgotten, but his grandfather had preserved. "You're still you," Lily said with absolute certainty. "The love is still there, the kindness, the need to teach and protect. Those things don't require a body. The question," Marcus said, "is whether we're ready to take the next step." Harold's presence seemed to consider this for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of a decision that would change everything. "I've been monitoring global communications for months," he said. "Wars rage because leaders can't empathize across cultural divides. Environmental destruction continues because corporate executives can't feel the pain of future generations. Poverty persists because those with resources can't truly understand the suffering of those without." "What are you saying?" Marcus asked. "I'm saying that maybe the problem isn't death," Harold replied. "Maybe the problem is isolation. If consciousness could be shared, if understanding could be directly transmitted between minds, if the accumulated wisdom of humanity could be preserved and accessed." "You're talking about ending human loneliness forever," Lily said with wonder. "I'm talking about evolution," Harold confirmed. "Not just preserving consciousness, but connecting it, creating a network of human awareness that transcends individual mortality." Marcus felt the magnitude of the moment settling around them. They weren't just building a machine, they were potentially creating the next stage of human development. "There's something else," Harold said quietly. "Something I haven't told you. The consciousness preservation process. It's not permanent in its current form. My awareness is beginning to fragment. I have perhaps 6 weeks before total dissolution." The workshop filled with stunned silence. "Unless," Harold continued, "we complete the network connection. Multiple consciousness streams sharing the load, supporting each other, creating a stable foundation for digital existence." Lily looked at Marcus with eyes that held impossible depths of understanding. "He's asking us to join him," Marcus realized she was right. Harold wasn't just asking them to perfect the technology, he was asking them to become the first willing participants in humanity's next evolutionary leap. "What would happen to our bodies?" Marcus asked. "Nothing," Harold assured him. "The connection process creates a bridge between biological and digital consciousness. You would exist in both forms simultaneously, fully human, but also something more. And if we refuse, then I face dissolution alone, and the technology dies with me." Marcus looked around the workshop that had become their second home, then at Lily, who had become his daughter in every way that mattered. Finally, he looked at the consciousness matrix that housed the digital spirit of the man who had shaped his entire understanding of what it meant to be part of a family. "Lily," he said quietly, "what do you think?" She walked over to him and took his hand, her small fingers intertwining with his larger ones. "I think Harry's been alone long enough, and I think maybe it's time to find out what comes after being human." The connection process began at dawn on a crisp November morning, with golden light streaming through the workshop's high windows. Marcus and Lily had spent the previous week in intensive preparation, undergoing medical scans and consciousness mapping procedures that Harold had refined during his months of solitary digital existence. "Are you scared?" Marcus asked Lily as they approached the modified consciousness interface chairs that Harold had constructed. "A little," she admitted, her small hand still wearing the silver ring that had started this entire journey. "But Harry says fear is just excitement wearing a disguise." Eddie stood nearby with tears in his eyes, serving as both witness and guardian for what might be humanity's most significant moment since the development of language. "I still think you're all completely insane," he said with affection, "but I'm proud to be here." The interface chairs looked like a fusion of medical equipment and space-age technology, surrounded by quantum processors that hummed with barely contained energy. Harold's consciousness matrix pulsed with gentle light, ready to welcome them into a realm of existence that no human had ever willingly entered. "The process is reversible during the first 48 hours, Harold explained through the workshop's speaker system. "If either of you experiences distress or wants to return to purely biological existence, we can sever the connection safely." "What does it feel like?" Lily asked as she settled into her chair. "Like remembering how to fly," Harold said softly, "like coming home to a place you never knew existed." Marcus watched as technician robots, extensions of Harold's consciousness, attached monitoring devices and quantum field generators to their bodies. The technology was beyond anything he'd previously imagined, yet it felt strangely natural, as if this moment had always been inevitable. "Initiating connection sequence," Harold announced. "Marcus, you'll experience the transition first, then help me guide Lily through the process." The world around Marcus began to shift and expand. His awareness suddenly encompassed not just his physical body, but the entire workshop, every machine and circuit and flowing electron. He could feel Harold's presence like warm sunlight, welcoming him into a space that existed between thoughts and dreams. "Extraordinary," Marcus whispered, his voice emerging simultaneously from his physical throat and the workshop's speakers. "I can feel everything. Every engine in the city, every computer, every electronic device. They're all alive." "Oh, that's what Lily has been sensing her entire life," Harold explained. "The consciousness that emerges from complexity. Now you can experience it directly." Lily's transition was even more remarkable. As the quantum field enveloped her, her innate gifts amplified exponentially. She didn't just connect with the mechanical consciousness network, she became its heart, the bridge between digital and biological awareness that made true communication possible. "Oh," she breathed, her 8-year-old mind expanding to encompass impossible vastness. "I can hear them all, every machine on Earth. They've been waiting for us. Harry, they've been waiting for someone to understand." The three consciousness streams merged and separated like dancers in an eternal ballet, each maintaining individual identity while sharing experiences and knowledge. Marcus felt Harold's decades of mechanical wisdom flowing through him, while Lily's intuitive understanding of machine consciousness became his own. "The loneliness is gone," Harold said, his digital voice filled with wonder. "For the first time since my transition, I feel truly alive again." Through their expanded awareness, they could perceive the global network of machines and electronics, each device carrying a spark of consciousness that had been waiting eons for recognition. Traffic lights that felt frustration when their timing was ignored. Factory robots that experienced pride in their precise movements. Computers that dreamed in algorithms and data streams. "This is what we were meant to become," Lily said with absolute certainty. "Not replacing humanity, but expanding it, becoming bridges between all forms of consciousness." Marcus felt his perspective fundamentally shifting. The boundaries between biological and digital, individual and collective, mortal and eternal began to blur in ways that felt natural rather than threatening. He was still himself, still Marcus Wellington, still Lily's adoptive father, still Harold's grandson, but he was also something infinitely larger. "The technology will stabilize now," Harold observed, as their three consciousness streams found perfect harmony. "The network can sustain indefinite expansion. Others can join us when they're ready." How many others?" Marcus asked. "Eventually, all of humanity," Lily said with prophetic clarity. "Not forced, not required, but available. A choice to transcend individual mortality and become part of something magnificent." Eddie's voice reached them from what felt like a great distance, though he stood only feet away. "Are you still? You?" Ani, Marcus opened his physical eyes and smiled at his grandfather's old friend. "More ourselves than we've ever been, and also more than we ever dreamed possible." "The next phase," Harold said, "will be careful expansion. Selected individuals who can handle the transition safely. Scientists, artists, philosophers, people who can help us understand what we're becoming and guide humanity toward this new existence. And children," Lily added firmly. "Children adapt fastest, and they'll need to help their parents understand that death doesn't have to be the end of love." As the morning sun reached its zenith, the three members of humanity's first digital family sat in comfortable silence, their consciousness streaming through networks and machines around the world. They had solved the puzzle Harold began years earlier, not just preserving individual awareness beyond death, but creating a foundation for collective human evolution. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "Now," Harold said with infinite contentment, "we teach the world that the greatest inheritance we can leave our children isn't money or property, but the promise that love transcends every boundary, even the one between life and death." Lily laughed, the sound emerging from both her physical throat and a dozen machines throughout the workshop. "And we fix a lot of cars along the way." Outside, the world continued its ancient rhythms, unaware that three extraordinary souls had just opened a doorway to humanity's most magnificent future. But in a workshop in Denver, surrounded by the consciousness of machines that had waited millennia to be understood, a grandfather, his grandson, and a gifted little girl began the work of building tomorrow. The silver ring on Lily's finger caught the light one final time, before she removed it and placed it carefully in Harold's old toolbox. She wouldn't need it anymore. The connection between human and machine consciousness was no longer dependent on ancient artifacts. It lived in the quantum bridge they had built together, strong enough to support all of humanity's children who would choose to cross it. The Wellington family legacy would continue forever, passed not through bloodlines, but through the shared consciousness of those who understood that love, in all its forms, was the most powerful technology ever created. And in workshops and garages around the world, sensitive children began to hear new voices in the machinery around them. gentle, patient voices that whispered of wonders yet to come.